Oh, hello everyone. Hey, veterans, AKA employees, everybody watching. Have I said thank you enough? I don't think so. I'm gonna say thank you again for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for all your comments, your likes, your shares, and for subscribing. And if you haven't done any of that, hey, don't forget to do that. I'm always looking forward to hearing what everybody else wants to learn more about as we learn about VA disability more here. There's plenty of topics to go about here. We get all kinds of different little scenarios that occur back here, a lot of errors that are being made, a lot of questions that are asked in how to handle all these claims. So let's talk about some more. Let's see if we can hash out some more problems, some problems that can ultimately go away and make the process easier for veterans and VA alike. All right. Those who don't know attorney Myth Lane, VA-accredited attorney, all that good stuff. Years of experience with the VA. Sitting back here doing everything I can to now help veterans in the process and work their way through all of the errors and bureaucracy of the government. So let's get past all of that and get started on some due process. So what's due process for the VA? Well, let's talk about where it came from. Just a touch here, because this is something that was always crucial. I thought really a good part of the training that I used to get in the VA about due process. Remember, due process is not just established by the United States Code or the C.F.R. or not just talked about in the VA's manual, the M21-1. In fact, due process is a constitutional right. It comes from the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. So just know that's where it starts out at. We get into the United States Code, we get into the CFRs, and we get a further explanation of it all and how it applies with the VA disability. So due process refers to ultimately the veteran's legal right to receive notice and a meaningful opportunity to respond before the VA takes any adverse action that affects the veteran's benefits. And again, that comes directly from the Fifth Amendment. It's rooted in the Fifth Amendment right there. It's a constitutional right. So veterans, the basic concept here is, in case you haven't had to go through this, and hopefully you never do, and in case you're not sure what it is. Ultimately, what could happen is at some point the VA may go, well, we want to reduce a benefit. Ultimately, if they say you want to reduce your benefit, I would contact a representative if you don't have one. Veteranline.com to get your free case evaluation from myself and have my team look at your claim and put together a strategy and make sure that that reduction is proper. There's your plug. So ultimately, let's just say it's legitimate, maybe legitimate. VA found some evidence in there that says, hey, this evaluation needs to be reduced. Maybe there was some sort of improvement in your disability veterans based upon some medical evidence and some exams and a whole bunch of other things. So when this does happen, though, the VA's due process requires them to notify you veterans of this proposed adverse action. Now, so this is going to happen usually when your overall evaluation is affected. So once if they make this decision, then that evaluation goes down, they have to give you a proposed notice. So keep in mind that first notice you get is just proposals. They haven't actually taken an action yet, and you're not losing your benefits right away because you have to be, again, given that due process right underneath the Constitution to defend and respond to the allegation here. Veterans, this is where the opportunity is when you get that letter. You get some time, 60 days. 60 days is the due process time limit. Used to be also plus 5 days mailing. I don't know if that's still in the manual or not, but we're going to say 65 days total, but 60 days is the day I remember. Submit evidence in response. So if the VA truly has found some evidence that shows this proposed reduction is required and they provide that due process, then know that you're given that 60-day window as part of your due process, veterans, to submit additional evidence showing the opposite is true and that your disability should not be reduced, save for sustained improvement. You can also, though, in the due process, veterans request to appear at a hearing. One thing I find fascinating in the way our lawmakers have written this law is you get the 60-day window for your due process. That's your due process, but your right to a hearing doesn't seem to last the same way in all those 60 days. You have 30 days, technically, veterans, to request that hearing, to the where when you request it within that 30 days, that the VA cannot take that adverse action even after the 60 days until the hearing is held. This hearing should be recorded, and there should be transcripts. Highly recommend it's recorded, just from experience and errors that I do see. But just know it should be recorded. There's transcripts and so forth. Nothing can happen to finalize that decision until that hearing is completed. But now, say day 31 or day 60, the law does say that if you request that hearing, they still have to hold the hearing. But even though this could be new evidence submitted in your due process period, the law has said that the VA is still now allowed to reduce whatever their due process action, or they're able to reduce or do their adverse action that is listed in their proposal in their due process letters. So keep that in mind. I am fascinated from my legal standpoint about how we give 60 days for full due process, but essentially only 30 at the same time before we take adverse action. And I know there's a bunch of stuff behind that, but I like to throw it out there that you guys think about it too, and see what you say about it as well. Before I go into any of all the other interpretations of it all. But now, your part of due process rights veterans isn't only to submit evidence, to request a hearing and appear at that hearing, but you're supposed to receive a written decision with the reasons and basis of that decision. So that decision can't just be a bunch of conclusionary text, canned text from their system, and it's got to thoroughly explain and analyze the issue at hand. This is a serious matter. It's all serious, but this is a very serious matter. It's due process. VA can't just go and take away benefits because they feel like it. Not that they do, but it does. I get it. Sometimes it feels that way. There are errors that are made. That's what I get to see, the bad and the ugly. And usually when there's a reduction, it's not done for the right reasons. As we fight some of those today, even as I film this video, where, where we just fight that. Okay, so here's some ideas, some things where really the due process is going to apply to. I've told you the reduction piece here. So usually the reductions are the big ones, like if there's some sort of improvement in disability, so that's shown adequately shown underneath the rules and laws, the guidance and so forth, then that's usually going to be a big one where you're going to get that due process is going to apply. But severing a service-connected disability, saying, oops, we messed up, and maybe, for example, there was a CUE and we should never service-connected it, now we got to completely cut it off, and like it was never service-connected before, due process is required there too. We've also got things like determining incompetency for VA purposes. You see this usually in mental health claims. Sometimes veterans will have conditions in their mental health that are so severe that the handling of money is nearly impossible. And so there's got to be determination that it's deemed incompetent underneath the law. The law uses that term, not one of the favorite terms, even I found in the VA, but basically what it says is, hey, veterans, you may need a fiduciary or somebody else to handle your money and help pay your bills because of your condition. So due process would be needed there. There are issues where terminating certain benefits. For example, if you become jailed or incarcerated for a felony, veterans, you will have a reduction. And some due process going on and some benefits there. For example, those are some big key ones. Those are just key ones. Those are just a few examples for you there. There's definitely a lot of other due process stuff here, but I'm trying to keep it more focused on the compensation side of stuff. That you've got some pension issues and some income-based issues, and some other things going on there. But these laws for due process have been around for a while. We've got court cases back in the early 90s, actually, and all the way up through even the present that says, hey, due process is vital, it's important. VA must demonstrate actual improvement in conditions, for example, and that it reflects improved function under ordinary conditions is just one case there. So like I said, when we look at those reductions, there's got to be a good showing of the evidence. There's even cases that talk about the complete review of the disability history that's required before any reduction. Again, you gotta look at the timeline. It can't be just one exam. You can't just go, oh, we got one exam, it shows improvement. Does it? Where does the rest of the evidence support that? It's got to be talked about. The courts have ruled that way back again in the 90s. We got some even 2000 cases that talk about failure to follow due process may amount to a CUE, a clear and unmistakable error. So ultimately, all that does is really make more work for the VA and everybody else involved. So VA, I'm just kind of cautioning you that the courts are out there. Be careful on the due process. Make sure your case is solid, because if it's not, the case is coming back to you on appeal or through a CUE. Could get overturned. Once we go through all those arguments, it'll get, but it gets overturned. It comes back to you now for you to fix. So, yeah, just know we don't want the hamster wheel. We don't want to keep running in circles with everything. But the point is, there's a lot of key cases out there, veterans and VA, that really talk about different aspects of due process all the way back to the 90s. That's how important this is when the courts really came into what they are probably today, you could say. So if due process is violated, sometimes this does happen. It doesn't happen very often. I've only seen it a couple times where a reduction, say, in a benefit is just done right away when it should have been, and there should have been due process, and due process was never set. So any reduction or adverse action taken without the proper notice and opportunity to respond is invalid. That decision's got to be reverted back to what it was, and then due process has got to be sent. So you can't just keep the reduction in place and then send due process. It's got to be, the law says it's got to be adjusted back. So it's got to be reinstated retroactively, and then you got to go through all those motions. Keep in mind again, if it's a violation, it does leave VA vulnerable to a remand or reversal by the board or the court. So kind of talked about that there, the hamster wheel. That's what I was really trying to get at. Just the whole idea of it all. Some common due process violations that I have seen before is that no proposal letter issued before the final decision. I mentioned that one. So that proposal letter has to be there, veterans. Sometimes you get one letter, sometimes you get two letters. You get that kind of notification letter of that the proposed decision, and then you get a due process letter, as we term it. Sometimes you get all that in one letter. So sometimes what I feel happens is when a letter goes out, we think the VA has already got it taken care of, and the due process went out and it never did. And then the final decision was made, or somebody makes a final decision by mistake. It affects the overall evaluation, decreases it, and they didn't catch it, and they finalize that decision without the proposal. So no proposal letter or no due process letter went out. Definitely a huge mistake. So veterans, if you see your benefits go down and you didn't get that proposal letter, that due process letter, or that proposed decision, definitely something to look into. I would go back and verify that was never sent to you, and definitely address that issue. But again, everybody's facts are different, so go by the facts of your case. This was a popular one I've seen, unfortunately. I made the mistake a couple times when I was newer, that the veteran was not given the full 60-day response period. So VA can't give a final decision enacting, say, a reduction or an adverse action of any sort before the 60-day mark is up. And remember, we've also got a mailing rule that applies, so it's really about 65 days. So that was one problem that really happened. I'll be honest, when I was new, you would be right on day 60, or you count 60 days incorrectly and you're really on day 59, or you forget about the mailing rule, then ultimately you'd be too early in the process. No hearing offered or held despite request. That's crucial too. I've seen that happen where somewhere the request gets filed and it just gets overlooked, and the decision's done about doing the hearing. So if the hearing request is received, again, veterans within the first 30 days of that due process letter, yeah, that hearing is got to be held first before that final examination can be done. Again, ultimately, that's really a common error. I think is what all these talk to. I did write down the idea of an adverse action taken during the response window. So again, if it's taken before that 60 days, yeah, that's definitely an error. Now, this is what I usually see. Let's get into what I usually see when it comes to due process veterans to help you out here. I've hinted to this, and I think I've kind of mentioned it. A reduction based on incomplete or inadequate exams. Now, I said like one single exam, but if that exam is incomplete or it's inadequate, and VA has relied on it, unfortunately, as we've talked about, they tend to rely on inadequate exams. That's the majority of my arguments back here. Probably 90% of my arguments, if not more, right next to reasons and bases. But if they have relied on an inadequate exam, and they have taken that reduction action based upon that inadequate examination, due process, yeah, there's a violation, there's an error. We got problems. So that's just due process in a nutshell. I want to do a little shorter video today, kind of give you an idea of what due process is. So due process really looks like this in short, just kind of summarize it all. There is some reason in the record VA has decided to make a proposal to reduce your benefits, veterans, and this idea should come from the evidence as a whole. A lot of times we do see, unfortunately, it comes from one piece of evidence. We used to call it top sheeting. It's not allowed, but it does happen. And this proposal comes down. Right? You get a due process letter. Like you said, it could be a part of that notification letter as one letter. It could be two letters. I've seen both ways. But you get this letter, and then you get 60 days. You get 60 days to provide additional evidence if you want to. Maybe in your facts of your case, a hearing is really a better idea. Then what you want to do is make that request for a hearing, and that hearing has to be held. So if you do that, hearings will be held before any action is taken to finalize that proposal. If that hearing is done again after the 30 days and before the 60 days, the VA can still actually continue to finalize the proposal and hold the hearing after the fact. Again, seems kind of weird for due process, but that's the way the rules are written, the laws are written. But it does give you an opportunity to dispute the proposal and point the VA in the right direction. Now, from my experience, unfortunately, VA, I find a lot of times we struggle to be on the same page. We have to do hearings, and we have to point out the errors, because a lot of times these reductions and due process issuances are improper. They're an error. Like I said in one of my examples here, usually because somebody relied on an inadequate exam, or maybe they didn't review all the evidence and they relied only on one examination, did that top sheeting method that some tend to do. So there you go. There's a summary of the whole thing. But veterans, remember, if you get a reduction, you don't agree with it, I would highly recommend a representative. You do have your choices between some BSOs, some accredited agents, and some accredited attorneys, such as myself, veteranlane.com. Again, there's your plug. I'm going to leave you with that. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and I will see you next Tuesday.